Hey everyone, welcome to Developer Productivity Engineering Showdown, DP Showdown as we like to call it. We've been doing this event now for a couple of years and very excited for today's topic, dev tools at scale. Here's how it's going to work. We have 8 topics we're going to go through today with our panelists. And after each topic, you get to vote on who gave the best answer. And hopefully, we're hoping you learn something new or learn some new experiences from these folks and get to apply that into your day to day, if not just be entertained, and get you excited about developer productivity engineering, right? Let's go into our great contestants over here. First off, John from GrubHub. He's works on the platform engineering team there. He's also the organizer of the Chicago Kotlin user group. Yes, John. Next up, Leanne from Cash App. She also works in platform engineering there. I had the pleasure of working with her the last few years. And she works on all things with build, tests, and tools and whatnot. And very excited to have her. Finally, someone new I met recently in the last few months, Ryan from Meta. He's been at Meta for around 11 years, working as an IC, as a manager. Last 6 years, he's been working on all things developer tools. And his team supports all the different Meta apps from Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp and whatnot. Last but not least, Martin. I've known him for many years now. He worked on all the Netflix Nebula plugins. So if you ever use one of those Netflix Nebula Gradle plugins, that's all Martin's team. JDK Lifecycle Management team, and they essentially do Java developer experience for all of Netflix. That's everyone. Let's jump into the topics. The first one, a perfect warm-up topic for today's showdown. Mono-repo versus multi-repo. There's no right answer. This debate has been going on for like the last who knows how long. John, you're up first. Mono-repo versus multi-repo.
Okay, well, a mono-repo, of course, solves some problems, but it also has some downsides. For example, yes, you can make a cross-cutting concern change in one commit, but it can be a huge commit and no real easy way to break up the work. So I'm going to say multi-repo. With that, you can solve the same shared build tooling and setup problems in other ways, such as Gradle plugins, Jenkins DSL for your builds, and avoid that tight coupling at the repo layer.
Leanne, what do you think? Mono-repo, multi-repo?
Well, it depends a little bit on the application you're building. If you want to scale quite large, you probably want to go with a multi-repo. I know here at Cache, we started with a mono-repo, and it was perfect for us for the first little bit. But as we grew, we found that it was unsustainable and really not manageable, so we had to move to a multi-repo. So if you're going to go quite to large scales, I'd recommend a multi-repo.
Love that Cash App example. Martin, what do you think?
I would say just pick one and be good at it, because you will just pick the set of problems you want to solve and then dive into them and solve them. At Netflix, we picked multi-repo, and we are dealing with dependency hell issues. However, and also it's not black and white. You can be on the scale. So for example, we also support multi-repo at the team level. For example, our recommendation algorithms run in mono-repo, and they are quite happy.
Awesome. And Ryan, I'm sure you've seen both at Meta with your years there. Which one do you have the best experiences with?
Yeah, Ruz, you introduced this by saying there's no right answer. Well, I'm here to tell you there is a right answer, and it's mono-repo. I'm half joking, but look, when I was before I was working on developer tooling full time, I was working on Java backend services here. When I first started working on developer tooling here, I did the upgrade of all of our backend Java to Java 7. That took like 9 months to get over the line. It was dependency hell. The incentives really matter. When we moved to a mono-repo setup, we still had lots of different deployment targets. It took like 3 to 6 months to get onto 8. So it's a big difference.
Nice. You got some data behind the pain to kind of back up your claim. I love it. Audience, what did you like the answer to? Time for you to vote. And we got Martin. It was a close one. Martin, you're on the board. I guess everybody liked your dependency hell. I guess people don't mind it as much as this massive migration time. Question number 2. Honestly, this is my favorite question out of all these today, because productivity engineering is such a new thing. Nobody's really crushing it, right? We're all learning, and you want to learn from folks' mistakes. So, what's the biggest developer productivity mistake you've made in the last few years? Ryan, you're up first.
Got it. Biggest mistake, cut to Ryan. I see how it is. So the biggest mistake, it's a great question, I made in the last couple of years is we had some big migrations going on in the CI tooling here. And I noticed they were going on. It wasn't affecting the area I supported yet. I neither pushed for it to go to 100% quickly, nor said, we don't want to do this. I kind of let it live in the middle. And that ended up causing a lot of pain by the time it did get around to us. Really regret not pushing harder on that.
Okay, great. Martin, you're up next. Biggest developer productivity mistake you've seen?
So at Netflix, we have a list of recommended version for dependencies, which is coming from our platform team. And our Nebula plugins are applying those recommendations. And they are at soft recommendations. So if you don't have any version, it will be from that list. And we released a version where we changed this application and it applied all those recommendations as the lowest version for all the dependencies. And it caught a lot of people off guard. And I can say I didn't make a lot of engineers productive that day.
Okay, great one. Leanne, what about you?
I think the biggest mistake is honestly building the wrong things or focusing on the wrong things. Like software developers they're the best and the worst customers you can have because they can find you and tell you, and they actually understand what you're working on. But this also tends to lead to the loudest voices in the room and not necessarily the largest group of people's problems being solved. So I think it's really about looking at finding ways to actually collect data on where people struggle, and that's like a really interesting thing. Data is really hard to collect in this area, but building things for the largest group instead of the loudest voices.
John, to wrap it up.
Okay, at GrubHub, we have a Java runtime framework that we provide, and we did a major version bump in it, a backwards incompatible change. We tried to document all the changes needed for migration and provide a guide, and that worked well in 90% of cases, but that long tail 10% got pretty brutal. So left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth. Going forward, we're developing more tooling around tracking usage of our features so that we can deprecate and remove them on a continual basis without breaking anyone. It's more work on us to evolve these APIs and leave the legacy in place for a while, but it's much more productive for our 700 other devs.
Nice. Great one. All right, audience, time for you to vote on which answer you like the most. All right, Leanne, clear winner on this one. I guess they love that, prioritizing for the loudest voices. Yeah, I mean, I've heard. Oh, wait, did Martin just get a point? Wait, what happened? Technical. Wait, you got to back that up and get. Wait, Martin has 3 now. Oh my God, what is going on? Okay, Martin has 4. Where's? I need to throw my coffee out the window. Okay, all right, we'll keep going while the back end folks fix that. All right, next question. Don't worry, Leanne, you're gonna get the point. All right. This topic was the highest voted one, and when do you say a migration is done? And Martin, you're up first.
Yeah, this is really hard. We are recently working on a migration from our runtime framework to other framework based on Spring Boot. And if you make the change, it's good. But if you cannot make the change, it's a long conversation with the application owners and figuring out what will be the plan. If they need more time, we will schedule more time and longer the support, or maybe they will be able to take the responsibility of maintaining the application on their own.
Ryan, you're next. When is the migration done?
The math on this is simple. If you have a migration, things can be in 2 states. If you have 10 migrations, you have 2 to the 10 states. So migration is done when it's 100% done. It's always going to be a little fuzzy at the end, but we can't live like this. We can't live in the middle of like a dozen half-done migrations, and we have to reward people and push ourselves to get over the finish line and make sure that's something we recognize strongly in an engineering culture. It's the only way to scale.
Can't support multiple tools at the same time, especially when you have 10 migrations. John, what do you got?
I'm gonna say trick question. Nothing's ever done, but there are 3 distinct phases. There's the development of a solution, the rollout / adoption of the solution, and then the support, the ongoing support that happens at the end. So we track all 3 of those, the start and end of each phase, and celebrate when we move from one phase to the next phase.
And Leanne, to wrap up, when do you say the migration is done?
I think this is really a question of scope. So when you actually start a question, I think it's really important to define your very specific scope that you're working with. You're not done the migration until you have migrated everything, but sometimes that scope maybe changes or influences what that migration looks for. Because as Ryan mentioned, if you have 2 paths, you have to maintain 2 things. Your on-call has to be able to understand both paths. But it comes down to scoping. You want your projects to be done within a measurable amount.
All right, audience, time for you to vote on who you think gave the best answer. Oh, it's a close one. Ryan, by a smidge. All right, next topic, also a great one. How do you balance the trade-off of churn in your tooling? Churn versus shipping new features. And of course, tooling stability. Leanne, you're up first.
I think this is an interesting question because I think it depends what you're changing. Some changes don't actually involve churn. Adding a new feature that is a quality of life thing that people may or may not choose to adopt is not going to cause churn. We recently actually migrated from one logging back into another, and they actually did a really good job because this would cause churn, and they actually had overlap over the time so that developers had 4 weeks to kind of learn from one to the other. So you just really have to pay attention to what if your feature is going to cause churn or not.
John, you're up next.
We have very rigid backwards compatibility requirements from our engineering organization, so we spend a lot of time on tooling to track usage so that we can be confident that removing a legacy feature will not cause churn for teams. So all migration work is planned out well in advance, and we assist teams with it. And so basically my answer to the question is that we centralize as much of the churn as possible into our team to make things work smoother for everyone else. So we try to kind of avoid the question entirely by doing that. But we just kind of take it on ourselves a lot of the time.
Ryan, you're up next.
For this one, I think I go back to the business problem. One cohort of developers that my team supports is back-end engineers who are highly technical. They want to move quickly. They'd rather have the feature, even if it's a bit wonky at first. Another cohort my team supports is silicon chip engineers who are not software engineers. They're hardware engineers. They want the stability. They don't want to mess up a chip and have to lose like months and months of development timeline and have to kind of start over. So I anchor back to that and make the trade-off in context.
All right, love it. And Martin, to wrap it up.
We are definitely leaning to the tooling stability side. For example, recently we were working on enabling test distribution, and we did all the research on our side, and we automated all the migration in the build files to enable new JUnit framework, which not everybody was using at the time. We did a verification that your tests support the test distribution, and then at the end, as an engineer, you just received a simple PR with flag true, and your job was simple.
All right. And audience, your turn to vote on who gave the best answer. Drum roll, another close one between Ryan and John. You guys need to do another showdown one-on-one later just to battle this thing out. All right, we're going to do a quick commercial break from our sponsor, Gradle, and we'll be right back in around a minute.
You're working hard, but are you working smart? Hello, I'm Dr. DPE. Behind every great developer is a great set of tools. Whether you're writing code, debugging an error, or merging a PR, you can't get through the day without them. Dr. DPE, my builds are slow and my fan runs all day, but my code works. Can't I just ignore the performance of my tools? Ha ha ha, no. If you're staggering along with no idea how well your tools are integrated, you need clinically proven, doctor-recommended Gradle Enterprise. Gradle Enterprise is recommended for all developers seeking optimal performance from their toolset. Side effects include faster builds, shorter debugging cycles, cleaner carpets, sparkling countertops, and work days that end in a reasonable hour. In clinical trials, many users reported falling in love with their favorite tools all over again. Use only as directed.
That Dr. DP laptop fan, he's got to get that checked out. Maybe somebody got to buy Dr. DP in M1. All right. Next topic. How do you get developers to use your tools? Oh, yeah, I love this one. Did a lot of this last few years. John, you're up first.
Okay, we do a few things to dangle the carrot. We listen to devs and focus on efforts to address their specific concerns. We dog food as we build. We partner with early adopters to get fast feedback, get their buy-in of the solution. We produce good documentation, including migration documentation. We do lunch and learn presentations and pair with teams to implement. And then we track usage of our tools, provide a dashboard that gives us and management visibility of adoption levels. Finally comes the stick. We show red on that little dashboard, and that really gets people to move over.
Nothing like red on the dashboard to scare people. Love it. Leanne, you're up next.
Well, some of our tools have had actually some really good adoption. Those ones are really great. You just kind of put them out there and people adopt them. But most tools don't, unfortunately, have such a wonderful adoption story. A lot of it comes to showing developers the benefit. So we're running out like a new way to share protos between our services and a service in our poly repo. And we have some weird edge cases. And when people run into those, we show them how the new tools will help them benefit them in those cases, but also in their other repositories. So we start seeing people migrating after they start working with us to fix their problems.
Yep, love it. Selling the benefits. Martin, you're up next. How do you get developers at Netflix to use your stuff?
The same thing. We have to show them all the details we are doing for them and help them to weigh the decision whether they should go on their own. For example, customers we often encounter are Scala users. They tend to lean towards SBT because it has some benefits for Scala. But then when they are weighting it against our Grub tooling, they would be missing all the integrations with our dependency management, integration to Artifactory, metadata publication, and stuff like that. So they need to decide based on that.
All right, love it. And Ryan, to wrap up, how do you get meta folks to use your tools? I guess they kind of have to, but yeah.
Right. You could call this question revenge of the Mono-repo, because when we have something new to ship, we land it. We put up the diff. If all the tests pass, we land it. And it's great. Now, there are still cases where we have to be very careful, obviously, but we can land things like compiler upgrades for the whole repo at once in a very large repository. There are cases where we have to kind of stage it out into a few phases. And sometimes if we really need each team to go do some work to upgrade, then we actively support the new thing, actively deprecate the old thing. But for the most part, we just ship it.
All right, love it. All right, audience, time for you to vote who made the best point. Let's kick off that poll. John, you're on the board. All right, topic number 6. This is kind of like two questions, topics in one. what's the next big thing? And of course, developer productivity engineering. But also, what have you all seen that was a slam dunk? What can folks here take home to try that was a slam dunk for you? Ryan, you're up first.
I'm just going to go with the most recent slam dunk I've seen. We had a distributed linker that we landed internally. This is an LLVM, so it's open source tech, the distributed linking. Not a whole lot of companies use it, but it was a lot of work to bring in and make performant and correct and land well, but it was like 2x the speed for linking. It was half the memory or better in both cases. So I would just say, like, if you go look at your dependencies and figure out if there's something new in that tech, there could be a big win just waiting there for you.
Martin, you're up next.
So the next big thing, I believe, will be Project Loom in the new JDK. I think that will change the paradigm how we write applications. And the most recent one I've seen, at least internally, is that how we are moving toward JDK 17. We roll out JDK 17 to one of our services, and their canary failed. So we were like scared what we will see there, but the canary results were so good that they were unexpectedly failing because the responses were so fast.
The
Leanne.
next big thing, I live in a poly-repo, so we have to deal with breaking changes from one repository to another, and I would love to see early detection of these changes from, what repository you're going to break all the way to like what line you're going to break, to allow people to make informed changes. So what is a slam dunk? I think for me, we have some internal dependency upgrade tools that we try to keep all of our poly-repo up to date, and it's been working relatively well.
Love it. Dependency upgrade tools. And John, to wrap it up, what slam dunks or big things do you see in the horizon?
For last slam dunk, I'm going to go with the Gradle toolchain feature. It's really been a game changer for our JDK version migrations, as that's become more of a pressing thing. For the next big thing, I think it's your mileage may vary because the future is here, but it's just unevenly distributed. But real quick, I agree with Loom. Using protobus everywhere, service mesh, and finally consolidating core microservices into like more of like a single bigger microservice or bigger service as domains start to stabilize over time.
All right, audience, who made the best point? Who did you learn something new from that maybe you might want to try out? Ooh, another close one. John, you're on the board. Number 2. Yay. We got John and Ryan with 2 points. It's not about the points, but it's about learning something new. But the points makes it fun and different. So thanks for that. Question number 7. How do you identify developer pain in the developer lifecycle? Martin, you're up first.
Definitely, measure data. I would like to mention one metric we introduced fairly recently. It's a number of consequent builds for dependency updates that failed, and that help us to show how bad our dependency hell is. So if your dependency update build is failing a long time in a row, that means you have trouble to accept new dependencies. And we, for example, saw increase in those numbers when we released a new major version for our main libraries. So the metrics shows pretty good how we are doing.
Great answer. I love that one. I learned something new myself right there. Boom. Ryan, you're up next.
I love the point about data. My thing is go talk to people. And it kind of goes with Leanne's caveat earlier of like, don't just talk to the people who are the most frustrated. Also talk to the people who are happy and figure out what you're doing well that you can do more of. I think it's complicated, right? Developer productivity is not like the solved problem space. So it's really good to leave some room for intuition and for doing the right thing strategically. And I think just connecting with the people who you're trying to help is the best thing you can do.
John, what do you think?
So we do a few things. We do surveys. We also dog food our products a lot. We have services that leverage every single part of our framework that we develop ourselves so that we can know what it's really like. We pair with our product engineering developers too to kind of sit in their chair for a while. And we just keep a very open line of communication in Slack to just get as much feedback as possible.
And Leanne, to wrap up.
So we do a lot of dog fooding. Every tool that I write, I use. And I release to myself first. So if it breaks, I am the first to know, and the only person, or my team is the only team that is directly affected by those breaks. I really like when we actually talk to developers and find their pain points. This doesn't scale as companies grow, so we do have to also move to surveys. On top of that, we do need to collect data to figure out where we're actually going to save either large points of time or affect large points of people.
Nice mixture of data, surveys, and chatting with folks. And audience, time for you to vote on who made the best point. All right, we got Leanne on there with 2 points as well. Nice. Last and final question. This is a lightning round, 15-second kind of a thing. What is the biggest problem with IDEs? Leanne, you're first.
Cool. So for us, the biggest problem we run into is when our cache gets desynchronized. It can be sometimes difficult to diagnose, mostly because we don't want to invalidate the cache necessarily, especially if you're working in a larger repo, because it takes a lot of time.
All right, love it. John, you're up next. Biggest problem with IDEs?
I work mostly in IntelliJ, and for whatever reason, it seems like the past year or two, the indexing has gotten very slow, sometimes causing the whole IDE to freeze up for a little bit. That's my biggest pain point with IDEs.
You know, John, there's a talk at the DPE Summit from the JetBrains folks right about that. So they're aware of this one. Ryan, what do you think? Biggest problem with IDEs?
I think the worst thing about IDEs is also the best thing about IDEs, which is that it changes how you think. So you suddenly can't live without it. If something's easier to do outside an IDE, it can be harder to think of it. But, it's a tool. It's how you use it that counts.
And Martin, to wrap up, biggest problem with IDEs?
IDEs used to be editor and tool for building the application. I think they should stop being tool for building the application and delegate fully to build tooling we currently have, which is doing much better job, and not try to replicate that in the IDE.
All right, love it. Yeah, I agree with that one. IDEs doing too much. And final vote from the audience. Who made the best point? And Martin's the winner. Oh my God, we got a 4-way tie. Usually we would do a 15 seconds of fame on this one because it's not about actually winning. It's mostly about you, the audience, of learning something new. You're the true winner here. So I guess everybody's a winner. No 15 seconds of fame this time, guys. Sorry, you guys are all famous anyway, just from being on this show. But I want to thank everyone, the audience, for joining. And I want to thank, of course, GrubHub for letting John attend, and Cash App Engineering for letting Leanne attend, and Meta Engineering for letting Ryan participate, and of course Netflix Engineering for letting Martin and team always helping us with everything. And of course, my employer and the sponsor of this show, for giving us the funds to make this happen, and the whole team and whatnot. Thanks again to all of you. And what do we have coming up next? I want to plug the Developer Productivity Engineering Summit that's happening next week. Many folks from, leaders in developer productivity engineering will be there doing talks, including Meta folks and Netflix folks and Block and Cash App folks and whatnot. And hope you guys can make it to San Francisco to see us. And next Showdown is going to be CI at scale. We haven't scheduled it yet, but it's coming. And stay tuned for that. And thanks again, everyone.